Obviously, what you see from players in week one of the season is what they're going to be all year long. I mean, that's just science. At least that's sort of the way people talk after you get one game into the fantasy season, which means it's time for overreaction theater, which is one of my favorite parts of the first week of the fantasy season. So I went and picked out a handful of guys that were surprising either in a good or maybe a bad way in week one. And we'll talk about whether or not it's time to push all your chips in on these guys, or maybe it's time to just walk away from the table and say that you're completely done, or, which is probably really the case, it's probably somewhere in between. But who wants measured, reasonable analysis after week one? We just had football. It's time to be over the moon about everything. So we'll start down in Carolina. Robbie Anderson with the Carolina Panthers, who, look, I wasn't sure if he was going to be a fit in this offense with Teddy Bridgewater, but had a big day, including a long touchdown catch from Teddy Two Gloves. So now that we've seen Robbie Anderson have one huge day down there with the Panthers, Kimmy, are you all in on Robbie Anderson? Is it time to completely just buy in there or not?
You know, I'm all in on the fact that everyone just needs to get away from Adam Gase. Because again, this just goes to show that if you're an offensive player who is on Adam Gase's team, you're not great. The second you leave, it's like it's magic and all of the good things happen to you. However, with Robbie Anderson, I actually am kind of buying in on this, right? He had 115 receiving yards. A bulk of that came from a 75-yard touchdown thrown by none other than Teddy Bridgewater, leading the team to show that he is going to be the wideout to covet over a guy like Curtis Samuel. So I'm actually really excited by what I saw yesterday. I do think that now there is some more buy-in on Robbie Anderson. Again, it's only week one. It's a very small sample size, so I'm not going to go over the moon and really reach to get him and make any crazy trades. But I think this is a promising start.
I do agree with you. And like I said, I wasn't sure how he would fit into the offense, and I wasn't sure if he and Teddy Bridgewater would be a good fit because Teddy's not known as a guy who pushes the ball downfield. But we saw that on Sunday, and maybe it has something to do with Anderson's familiarity with Matt Rule and vice versa. They were together when Anderson was in college, so maybe there is something there. I was thinking that maybe Anderson would be the field stretcher to open things up for guys like DJ Moore and maybe give Curtis Samuel a little breath of fresh air. But look, if this is going to be reality for Anderson, then maybe it is time to get a little bit more excited. Let's also keep in mind, though, the Raiders secondary does have some issues, so we'll kind of give it another week or so, but I will say that the early returns were certainly encouraging about Robbie Anderson. All right, now, Iowa has become tight end U. I know that you know that, Kimmy. We've seen George Kittle, right, explode. We are hopeful that Noah Fant takes a big step forward this year. Another Iowa Hawkeye, though, doing big things, TJ Hockenson. And if there's ever a week to start TJ Hockenson in fantasy football, it seems like it's week one. Had a huge week one last year, had a good week one this year. So I'm going to ask you to answer this with your head and not necessarily your heart. Are we buying in big time on TJ Hockenson now?
No, and I feel guilty for saying this, but think back to last season. He had an incredible week one, and everyone was like, holy cow, now we understand why the Lions went out to get a tight end in the round one of the 2018 draft, right? He was explosive, he was great, and then he completely fell off the radar or went radio silent. Now, I understand he was dealing with a concussion and some other injuries on the season, but he kind of disappeared after that. I do think it's positive that Matt Stafford is healthy because clearly it seems as if when Matt Stafford is under center, he wants to connect with TJ Hockenson. But I am not hyping this hype train quite yet. I'm going to wait and ease into a few more weeks into the season before I place my bets.
Yeah, I think one of the things with Hockenson that certainly helped on Sunday was no Kenny Golladay in the lineup for the Lions. You got to figure when Golladay is there, he and Marvin Jones are going to absorb a ton of targets in that passing game. I think you will have occasional weeks when you see Hockenson pop, and hopefully he can stay healthy for the majority of the season this year. But I think on a week-to-week basis, it's going to be hard to count on him just because I'm not sure how many targets are going to be there to go around. So I would say that, look, it was nice. It was great if you started him and you took advantage of it. Congratulations. But I do think that for most of the season, you might be playing the matchups. When there's a good tight end matchup, then you think about starting Hockenson. Other than that, you may want to find somebody else who's on your bench that you want to play on a weekly basis. So let's stay in Detroit, though, as we go to the guys that maybe we're completely cashing out on now, because Kerryon Johnson was a guy that we weren't 100% sure on. DeAndre Swift got drafted, and we knew that he was certainly going to fight to get a lot of those opportunities. And then right before the season started, the Lions went and picked up Adrian Peterson after he was released. And it was Peterson who got a lot of work on Sunday in that Lions backfield. Kerryon's still a young player. You think there's still time for him to turn his career around, but is it time to maybe sort of wash our hands and walk away from the Kerryon Johnson situation in Detroit?
I was incredibly disappointed by that performance. I think though some of us already had apprehensions of him going into the season, there were still a lot of people who were kind of on that hype train. And we thought, he is going to be the number one back in that offense. But then Adrian Peterson, very much like Aaron Rodgers, said, hold on, hold my beer. Let me flex my vet muscles. And then DeAndre Swift also said, no, let me go in and show you why they went and got me in this year's draft. I'm a rookie, but I'm going to go ahead and perform. Now, I think Kerryon Johnson was kind of the middleman in that, and he got lost. So for me, I'm kind of cashing out. It's not someone that I kind of want to take a risk on. I think we saw so many positive flashes from DeAndre Swift. And when you're playing with Adrian Peterson, you want to get him the ball, right? He's Adrian Peterson for a reason. So I'm kind of out.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one too. And I will admit that I got my heart broken last year by Kerryon. I was big on him and it didn't work out. And it wasn't completely his fault. He dealt with some injury issues last year. But now with the added competition of DeAndre Swift there, I don't know how long Adrian Peterson is going to be a big-time player in this offense, but it is still one more person that they've got to get the football to. We know they're wide receivers. We just talked about TJ Hockenson. I don't think this offense is good enough to support all these guys. It's not like Kansas City, right, where you've got a great quarterback and you've got a great offensive mind as the head coach, and you can feel like there are a lot of options that can be sustained over the course of the year. I don't feel that way with the Lions offense, and so I think that in a year where you may be looking for a lot of running backs off the waiver wire, I think Kerryon Johnson is one that, look, maybe you stash him on your bench and hope for something to get better, but I don't know how often you're going to play him because I just don't know that the offense is going to be good consistently enough for it to make an impact. All right, last one. We talked about DeAndre Hopkins and his big day down there in his debut with the Arizona Cardinals. The guy that we've been waiting for to take over as their number one receiver, Christian Kirk, was nearly invisible. 1 catch, 0 yards. That was the day for Christian Kirk. He's another one that, as I said, we've sort of been waiting for him to pop. Is it time to maybe just kind of pull the plug on the Christian Kirk experiment in fantasy football?
See, this is hard for me because I actually have a few shares of Christian Kirk in my own fantasy rosters, and I was mortified to look down and see 1 fantasy point. And then on the same roster where I had Christian Kirk, I had the Saints defense who got 17 fantasy points. And I was like, what is going on? What kind of craziness is this? But ahead of the season, Kyler Murray said that Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, and DeAndre Hopkins have an opportunity to have 1,000 plus receiving yard seasons, but we just didn't see it. Maybe, the game on Sunday was a revenge game for DeAndre Hopkins, and he just wanted to flex his muscles to really show that Bill O'Brien messed up, and Kyler Murray was in on that. But at the same time, they didn't really show a lot of promise for Christian Kirk. So I don't want to completely cash out and put him on my bench and wait and see. I don't know. It was just kind of disappointing, but I really do hope that he has some opportunities. I think if there's any quarterback who can get multiple receivers with 1,000 plus receiving yards, it is Kyler Murray. But again, it was a really disappointing performance. 1 fantasy point. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, that's really frustrating. I think there will be games where Kirk gets more opportunities, and maybe this was the Cardinals trying to help Nuke win the breakup, and we're just going to force feed you targets, and we're really going to make a statement with you. I do think there will be times when Kyler Murray spreads the ball around, but with Nuke there, I think the opportunity for Christian Kirk to step up and be that number one type receiver is probably gone for now. So I'm not advocating that you just cut bait on Christian Kirk just yet. But it's going to be hard to sort of count on him. He's a flex option, I think, at best in a lot of leagues. And there will be some weeks where you get your heart broken if you have him in your lineup. By the way, the last time an NFL team had 3 wide receivers with 1,000 yards apiece, it was the Arizona Cardinals in 2008. Anquan Bolden, Larry Fitzgerald, who's still there, might be able to do it again, and Steve Breston, which is probably the name that most people don't remember, but Steve Breston was the 3rd guy to have 1,000 yards in one season with the Arizona Cardinals. So